Welcome to the second day of the Airthings Masters, the second tournament in the Champions Chess Tour. 15-minute, 10-second bonus per player, 12 Grandmasters, $200,000 at stake. This recap video is actually going to, despite featuring rounds 5, 6, 7, and 8, we're only going to look at 4 games. Why? Because today we had 21 draws out of 24 games. That's what happens when 8 people have to qualify out of 12. Everyone plays it safe. But don't go anywhere. We're still going to learn a lot. We're going to have a good time. Just, what are you going to do? 21 draws. We kick things off in the 5th round, the first round of day 2, between Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, and Daniil DUBOV. DUBOV, exceptionally creative player, and worked on Team Magnus, and begins the game with Magnus's own opening against him. That's kind of an interesting point. The Rossalimo, going for a closed Sicilian, and bishop takes c6. And the point of the Rossalimo is you give away your light squared bishop, and you damage black structure, and here you make a big decision. Do you play d3 and h3, or do you play c3 and d4? Those are the 2 plans. You can't play at all. Can't go, you know. So he takes the center with c3 and d4, and you might go, why the hell did DUBOV play knight h6? Well, to the uninitiated, this looks extremely stupid. I mean, you know, you're taught as a beginner to put the knight in the center, but you're also taught as a super grandmaster to confuse the beginners. And make sure that they don't know what the heck is going on, so they can't copy your style, so they can't beat you. No, I mean, the thing is, you just get to break the rules. The point is, you want to attack the center with the f-pawn. That's what you want to do, and it will be better here. And despite the bishop being able to take it, this is what happens. Now, the first surprise of this game happens here, when DUBOV takes on e5, and in a position that has been reached like 50 times, Magnus plays this move, which doesn't look like some sort of, you know, he doesn't look like he's Sir Isaac Newton discovering gravity out here with this move, but the point is that this is just considered better, because you pressure c6, the rook is defending, the bishop, you know, maintains the pressure, maybe use the e-file, but Magnus takes the game in a totally different direction, and after DUBOV plays c5, b4, sacrificing a pawn, and playing the move a3. Very interesting position, actually. Essentially, what Magnus is saying is like, yo, man, if you take here, I'm going to take with my bishop, and now I have this pressure, so you cannot easily play e6. Then I'm going to play knight to c3. It's not so easy for you to protect this pawn. So Magnus plays an opening surprise against the man like the witch. You know, DUBOV is like the witch with the cauldron of opening surprises. You know, everything's bubbling. But DUBOV doesn't fall into it, and here finds a very interesting idea, d4, which, again, to the untrained eye, just looks like 2 things can take this. But he's going to get some counterplay on this diagonal, and that's exactly what happens in this game. Actually, DUBOV breaks out over there, trades off the whole queen side. It's a fascinating position, exactly what I said, right? This, staring down this way. But Magnus is up a pawn. What does DUBOV have to counterbalance this? Because the evaluation of this position is 0-0-0. DUBOV has more open lines, because he's obviously way more active. Magnus hasn't moved the bishop in 20 moves, so that's, you know, first of all, that's impressive in and of itself. But he can't really develop, despite his extra pawn. But then Magnus begins to kind of unravel a little bit. First he plays e6 to open up his bishop, and then look at this, rook d8, and it looks like you're just losing the knight, because queen, rook, bishop all attack, and Magnus says this. And the fascinating thing about this move is that it tactically defends the bishop. Now the bishop is pinned to the queen, and you're going to lose the bishop anyway. So for a move, you're going to lose the knight, but then you're going to immediately win it back like this. Very nice kind of indirect defense. If you watched yesterday's recap video, Grishuk did this a lot in his game against NEPO. And if you haven't watched yesterday's recap video, what are you doing? No, I'm serious. Like, come on. Come on. Anyway, DUBOV goes for a queen trade because he believes that in this position, if he just simplifies everything, it's just a draw. And he's not wrong. Except the problem is he's playing Magnus Carlsen. And he's a pawn down, and he's playing Magnus Carlsen. And I'm not sure if I've mentioned this yet, but he's playing Magnus Carlsen. So rook d1 check, king h2, and let's watch as Magnus puts the pressure on DUBOV. g4, knight to d6, right? And perhaps the most instructive moment of this entire game comes right here, when the e-pawns are traded. And now it's 3 versus 2. This is what this is called. This is a 3-on-2 endgame. You want to sound smart to all your friends? Say, this is a knight and rook. I almost said the wrong piece, trying to act smart to your friends. Knight and rook endgame, it's a 3-on-2 same side. And they're going to be like, whoa, that's very, oh, he sounds so educated. So the point of this position, right? During the live broadcast, I said Magnus is going to play this forever. And the move that he's going to end up playing is this move that he plays right now, rook to e3. And this is such a difficult decision. You would think, oh, if I just trade, easy draw. No rooks, easy draw. But it's not so clear because the pawn has now shifted. It's no longer an f-pawn, it's an e-pawn, and Magnus will bring the king and bring the pawn and maybe try to win the game. So DUBOV doesn't want to trade the rooks. DUBOV goes back, and this allows Magnus to infiltrate. Now Magnus is trying to pressure him from the other side of the board, brings back the knight. Look at this maneuver by DUBOV, by the way. Knight to the corner, knight to g6, knight to h4. Very nice maneuver. Pops the knight out to h4, king to g3. And with this move, now you're looking at a pawn break at a key moment, because this pawn is stuck defending the knight, which is, by the way, one of the reasons I was very perplexed by this. I thought the knight was supposed to go to f4, but the computer hates that move even more. Why? You need to jostle for this. Your knight actually has to contest the f5 square, or else your position is absolutely miserable. And then DUBOV here should have gone after Magnus's knight to prevent the move f4, because the knight would have been hanging, but he went here. Now f4 happens, now check, here, here, here. Oops! And this is not a free pawn, because you would play check, the knight would have to take you, and you would take the rook, and you would go on to very easily win this game. So now DUBOV plays rook d2 attacking, Magnus plays knight e6, and takes on g5. And here DUBOV could have gone for an endgame where he is down 2 pawns, maybe trying to defend, but he plays the move knight to f3 and simply blunders a check. This is actually fascinating. Knight f3 looks like a draw. Why? Because you've caught the king in a net. It's a very famous rook and knight pattern. Remember this. Rook covers the king on the second rank, the knight defends the rook and hits the king. And if you, for some reason, think you're really genius and run to the corner, you get mated like a dummy. So don't do that. And that's what DUBOV went for, but he just simply blundered in the game, the move g6 check. And now you cannot take because knight d4, rook attacks the king, knight attacks the knight, bye-bye. And that's it. Then Magnus brings back the rook. There's no more knight f3, and the game is over. A few moves later, this knight is just stuck. This pawn is promoting. I mean, Magnus makes it look. I mean, he just makes all these people look so foolish. I mean, it's just unbelievable what he does to this caliber of player. Disgusting. All the other games in the first round were drawn. Yeah, because everybody's out here drawing, hence the art school reference. I suppose I should have explained that in the introduction, but okay, you had to watch 7 minutes to understand the art school reference. Completely fine. And the other first round game, which was very interesting, was between Anish Giri and HARIKRISHNA. My Indians, who were upset there was no HARIKRISHNA in yesterday's recap. I mean, he just had 4 very solid draws. It was nothing crazy. But I'm going to feature this game between also Anish, who streams a lot, for the Indian audience as well. This one was what's called a semi-Slav defense. It's when black makes this little triangle of pawns, and then takes on c4 and plays b5. This is called the Meran. M-E, not moron, although, aren't we all? Meran, M-E-R-A-N, the Meran variation. And essentially what happens is the pawns clash in the center here, e4, e5. And then the players are kind of having this silent conversation, deciding which way to castle. Both sides, a very funny situation, can castle in either direction. Anish Giri chooses to castle directly into his opponent's pawns. HARIKRISHNA also chooses to castle queenside, so same side, queenside castling. Now rook f1, h6, and things get spicy right here. HARIKRISHNA says, yo man, make a decision. Stop stalling. And he says, okay, well, here's my decision. Kaboom. Okay, free bishop. Kaboom, take my rook too, man, I don't care. Okay, and bishop takes e5, so he gets the knight back. So what's the count? Anish Giri has a knight and a pawn for a rook, but what really makes this a nice position for him is the weakness of Pantala's king, and these 2 pawns have no guards. And here Anish Giri plays an extremely aggressive move, a move that, I mean, it's one of the most dazzling attacking moves I've ever seen in my life, actually. He plays the move king a1, and, okay, obviously, I'm joking, but this is actually genius, and let me explain why. Black is threatening 2 things. Black is threatening, number 1, to go g4. The knight has to guard the bishop, so if the knight moves, you win the bishop. Black is also threatening to go b4, removing the knight from the defense of e4. Very nice removing the guard tactical exercise. And then bishop takes pawn, pinning the queen to the king, and the knight won't guard this anymore. So 2 threats. How do you deal with them? Of course, you move your king to the corner. Why? Well, because b4, the knight just jumps out, and now this is no longer a pin. And if g4, the knight still jumps out this way, taking the pawn, because again, there is no pin. And the queen goes to c5, and you win the game. because Pentala's king just has nothing guarding it, right? So instead, we got queen c4. Instead of the pawn push, we got queen c4, rook c1, bishop e4, and now equal or exceeding danger. Queen's hanging. Do I have to move it? Bep, no, because I have b3. And the point is that if you go here, rook is hanging, bishop is hanging, and knight is hanging, and you're just, yeah, and this is hanging. So, and then once you get here, this and this are under attack. So, very bad news. And Anish just finds a nice way here to get everybody off the board, and he's up a knight. And he wins it in a nice way. When you're up material, you have two ways of winning. Number one, actually three ways. Number one, go checkmate the opponent. Number two, simplify it into an endgame. Number three, punch your opponent. But I mean, actually, that one might not even, the game might still go on, actually. I don't know. I don't condone such things, but, and time, I guess you could win on time too. But that's exactly what happens in this game. Anish ends up, you see, very direct. Rook, rook, again, simplifying into an endgame, and now a very nice kind of finishing technique here. He plays knight to e2. A backwards knight move, attacks the pawn, and notice that all pawns are on the opposite color square that Anish controls, right? Anish is, he's got all the dark squares under control here, and Pentala resigned after knight to e2 because this would have happened, and this would have been the beginning of the end for all the pawns. So Anish Giri, after a rough first day, losing 2 games, beats Pentala HARIKRISHNA in the first round of day 2. And he is doing, I mean, he seems poised for a comeback. Let's also not forget that Daniil Dubov lost the first round. Well, time to pair the two guys that are on very opposite ends of what's going on. I mean, Daniil loses a game that he probably had no business losing, and Anish Giri wins a very nice game. So we begin the second round, or second round of day 2. So this one was a Berlin. Knight takes e4, d4, knight d6. And here the main line is generally this, with, you know, the players do this, and, okay, like 75 more moves happen, and then they agree to a draw. So, in this game, we actually got a line from Dubov, d takes e5, sacrificing his bishop, but trapping the knight, and then doing, this. And here, normally, what ends up happening, is the players draw the game like this. It'll be like d5, en passant, knight d4, queen d4, like queen d6, and then there's some repetition of moves here, like queen e4, queen e6, like something like this. And it happens a lot. In fact, it happened, not that, but that's also not a bad move. It happens a lot at this level. But Daniil, in true Daniil fashion, plays the move c3, so he has a surprise ready. Then he plays f4, and he builds this really big center. It's a really nice looking center, nice, powerful. Anish tries to chip away at the center, and now this trade happens. And not all trades are created equal. That's just a lie they tell beginners. All trades have positives and negatives, for the most part. This one removes one of Dubov's most powerful pieces, but makes it very difficult for Anish to push his pawns, because this bishop kind of monitors. What's the positive? The rook comes here and has the open file, so pluses and minuses, the bishop can come out this way, right? And that's exactly what happens. The bishop now moves out that way. Rook comes up to f3, a trade, and queen d7, and then something like this. So this is move 18. At this point, Daniil still hasn't spent even 10 seconds on the clock. Apparently, this is still his preparation. Hey, just think about that. You could literally play 18 moves of any freaking opening, and the guy is still reviewed it with his notes. It's awful. I mean, it just sounds like a nightmare opponent. The guy knows what you're going to do before you're going to do it. He's like freaking Pegasus from Yu-Gi-Oh! Queen f5 is a very nice move. Threatening mate. Silevi, that's not mate. Stupid. Just rook takes. Yeah, but okay, well, who's dumb? Rook takes, bishop, smothered mate in the corner. Well, unfortunately, Daniil, well, or fortunately, depends on who you're cheering for. And now queen to c2, and again, equal or exceeding danger. Your knight's hanging, your pawn's hanging. What's worth equal or more than that? This bishop, right? How do you target that bishop? Not with your queen. The queen is not attacking the bishop if it goes there. A bishop c5, very nice move. Point being that when you take, I take this. And if you had taken me like this, I would have taken, let's say you play queen takes b2, you know, you think you're very fancy, you can also do danger levels, right? Because my rook is hanging. Yeah, but then I move my rook. My queen, the beautiful trident, defends everybody. The bishop is hanging, and now the bishop also sees nothing. Just all empty squares. Knight is coming in a moment, and I'm going to mate you. So very, very difficult and unfortunate position. Bishop c5, and Anish, I don't know if he blundered this move, or I mean, it's just already incredibly difficult. Just queen g5. It's like telegraphing a pass, you know? Like, or telegraphing a move. I'm gonna go queen d8. Try to stop me. I mean, if you go here, I'm going to play e6 or rook f1 even, and rook f8, it's just game over. So Anish ends up having to sacrifice his bishop, and now DUBOV has to find a very nice defensive idea. He plays rook f1, trades, simplify when you're up material, and when you're up material with an open king like this, make sure you can avoid perpetual check. Always look for checks for your opponent, and that's exactly what he does. Sometimes you have to use your pieces as a shield. See? If this, then this. That was DUBOV's idea. He's going to bring the bishop back to cover the king. He's up a bishop. Now he's going to win the endgame. Well, and that's exactly what he did. I mean, he brought back the bishop and he won the endgame. And he did that by hunting down the pawns and using the constant weakness of the black king against Giri. So he wins the pawns, the pawns start coming down. And what's the biggest asset? What is the biggest benefit of DUBOV's position here? The fact that his Daniil Dubov is a very good one. You know, he wears very expensive sweaters, but more importantly, it's this pawn. Actually, if he didn't have this pawn, probably black is doing quite okay with the two passed pawns. But watch, I mean, he's, you know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. He just pushed this pawn 3 times and Anish resigned. Yeah. I mean, and again, bop, bop, bop. And why? Well, let's say, you know, queen a1 or something, queen d2, you know, queen a7. I'm just going to win this pawn. I'll play like queen g5 or, I don't know, queen c3. And the reason this is winning is my pawns. See, if these pawns didn't exist, queen and bishop don't beat a queen. It just comes down to the pawns. And Anish chose not to carry on in the game. A crazy turn of events. Magnus beats DUBOV, DUBOV beats Giri, Giri beats HARIKRISHNA. So everyone's kind of rotating in the beginning. And you know what the craziest thing about this recap? This is the second round of day 2. There were no more decisive games. The next 12 games were drawn. Now, before you leave, I'm still going to show you one more game that HARIKRISHNA played. It was the most exciting game of the final round, and it was very surprising. It was a very, very surprising game. Because it ended in a draw, but you're going to see that it really didn't need to end in a draw, and it was a pretty instructive game as well. So first things first, against the d6 Sicilian, not the e6, but against the d6 Sicilian, white can play queen takes d4. So this is lesson number 1 for those of you that are looking for an interesting, exciting weapon in the Sicilian defense. The queen takes d4 Sicilian is fascinating. The point is that against knight c6, you can either move the queen back a square or even play bishop b5. The point is that you're going to take. Then your queen's going to stay in the middle. And if your queen gets kicked out, you just slide it back a square. Not a problem. And oftentimes you castle queenside. In this game, HARIKRISHNA chose to castle kingside, play rook d1. And it led to a very imbalanced game. He plays h3. These moves are important because they completely prevent this bishop from developing in this direction. So Nepo takes the next best thing. He plays bishop here. Now we get knight c3, trying to protect against the move d5. Rook c8, a3, because you want to show your opponent you know how to push pawns. Queen a5 and bishop d2. Very, very calm position, but it's about to start getting a little bit more lively. Queen c5, and Pentala HARIKRISHNA says, I'm good, no queen trade for me. Let me go transfer my queen over there to attack your king. Bishop comes back to f6, says, okay, maybe not so fast. And now they trade the queens, and they trade here. But still, white is happy. The one benefit of this position is, of course, that black has the open c file. If anybody's going to play this for anything, it's black. And then Hari started doing some very interesting stuff here on the queen side. Again, what is this called? 3-on-2, kind of, that you could develop on the queen side? Queen side majority, you've watched my videos, you know what it is. c5, now a5, right? Now h4, rook c6, bishop slides back to f1. Maybe you're going to play f3 and start bringing the king. That's what you need in a rook and bishop endgame, right? b4, bishop d7, and bishop and b5. And so Nepo here, on rook b6, b4, simply blundered the fact that his rook is in a very, very uncomfortable position. What Pentala was trying to do with this move is he was trying to get a position with a 2-on-1. We've talked about this a few times over the course of these recaps, and now we're adding more information. That is a queenside majority. That is a huge benefit for this endgame for white, because what you're going to do is get this rook behind the pawn, slowly, and then push. And it's going to be really hard to stop. So Nepo plays bishop d7, attacking his rook, and now b5, and all of a sudden, the pawn is hanging, and if you take it, I have not rook a5, but rook d4, and you are paralyzed. You cannot move. If you move your bishop, as he does, he has to lose the rook. If he doesn't move his bishop, I'm going to go a4, and you're in trouble. And if you play a4, then I'm going to go c4, and you're in even more trouble, because you can't even take my bishop anymore, you just lose a lot of material. So Nepo just goes and exchange down. That's just what happens, right? Just exchange down. And then here, Pentala HARIKRISHNA repeats moves. He just repeats the moves. Look, of all the draws today where the Grandmasters are just playing solid to maintain their top 8 position, this one surprised me the most. Because if we look at the standings, right? If we take a look at the scoreboard, this is the results after the last day, after the second day. 6 people have 4.5. Grishuk has 4, right? Pentala drew this game, but before this round, he had 2.5 and Nepo had 3. If he had won this game, he would have 3.5 points and would be tied for the final qualification spot. And of all the games today, it felt like this one was one where you would go for the win. Why wouldn't you, you know, like, for example, okay, let's say like in this position, instead of rook back to b3, protecting your pawn, you go rook like b3, bishop c4, rook b2, right? Rook b2, and then you just go for this. And what's going to happen is you are going to lose a pawn, they're going to lose a pawn, and maybe you play this position for something. Of course, it's still going to take forever, objectively speaking, but this is your best chance, right? With the 2 rooks and rook versus bishop. Of course, look, I understand. I am not as strong of a player, but it's just so strange, right? Like, because these opportunities don't come along when everybody's making 15-move draws. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. This was a very shocking last round game. Everybody else drew, like, immediately, basically. What to say and what to do, right? Sometimes this happens in top-level chess. Tomorrow, there are 3 more rounds. So we're going to be looking at Anish, Pentala HARIKRISHNA, David Anton, and Jan Nepomniachtchi, who are half a point out of the final qualification spot, the 8th place spot, to make it into the knockout bracket. Stay tuned for more coverage tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern if you're watching on Twitch or the recap video. Much love. Take care.